What's up? Oh, there we go. We top live right now. Hey, everybody. Peace. It's another edition of Super Facts. This might be the last edition of Super Facts that we do on Instagram because I'm trying to figure out how we're going to get over to either like a YouTube page or actual like podcast situation. So it might just be like a YouTube page. So I might just do that. But I do like it being live streamed for some reason. And then just store it somewhere. So I'm working on this being like the last version of Super Facts like this with the on IG Live with the phone, everything else. So how you guys doing today? I don't even know what day it is. I'm deep. We halfway into Ramadan. So Ramadan Mubarak, Assalamu alaikum to everybody out there who is fasting all around the world. And more importantly, for the people who aren't able to fast because they don't have food in the first place. And that's one of the points and goals of Ramadan is to remember those people who have less than you. And make sure you keep them not also on your mind, but also in your activities and your actions. Okay? So we're going to talk about a few things on this here edition of Super Facts. We're going to make it quick. We ain't going to belabor the points too long or drag or rant. The first thing that I do want to talk about is, you guessed it, Ramadan. Because I know what you're here for. I really know why you're here. But since you are here, I'm going to hold you here like a teacher at a high school class that you don't want to be in because you want to go in the bathroom and maybe smoke. Not weed, but smoke something. Maybe vape. Maybe the kids are vaping in school now. I don't know. But you here, and I'm going to hold what you really want to be here for over your head. I'm not going to give it to you until the end. So what I am going to give to you is, first let's talk about Ramadan. Yes, Ramadan. We're in the middle of Ramadan. I know some of y'all out there of my fans or folks who critics, whatever, who aren't Muslim, maybe don't know what Ramadan is, and what people do during Ramadan, etc., etc. There's a bunch of little pieces and parts that I'm not going to get into about Ramadan for people that are not Muslim because it becomes like somewhat of a rabbit hole. So if you are Muslim and you're interested in learning more about Ramadan, I would cordially direct you toward reading some hadith or going to your local masjid or local Islamic website, chat room, and talking with fellow Muslims about it who have a higher, deeper understanding of some of the pieces and parts of what Ramadan is and what it's about. This is just something general for folks who aren't Muslim, who may be interested in what Ramadan actually is and why probably 1 billion people are fasting these 30 days. So basically, Ramadan, for the uninitiated, is a month in the Islamic calendar. The Islamic calendar runs on the cycles of the moon. So it shifts. I don't understand that. I don't know what that means, but that's what it does. So Ramadan basically changes every year. So every year it's on a different day. It probably shifts maybe 15 days about so or something like that. 10 to 15 days, I think is safe to say, backwards, right? So it goes back through the year. So if it was this year started May 15th, the year before last, I think it started like June something, like maybe June 10th or maybe even late May or something like that. So it shifts, it changes. And it's 30 days. And what happens during those 30 days is Muslims don't eat from sun up till sundown. And just to make that super clear about that, you don't eat or drink, smoke, have sexual relations. Those are the things that basically break your fast, right? Now there's some other parts beyond that where people try not to lie. They try not to listen to diss records. They try not to watch TV or movies. They kind of just generally kind of stay away from all those things which potentially are a little bit more subversive or naughty things. They're trying to stay away from those naughty things. But the things that they definitely stay away from is the food and the drink and the sexual relations. And there's some caveats to that. If you're sick, you shouldn't fast. meaning you have to take pills or anything like that. You should focus on getting healthy. If you're traveling, you do not have to fast. But also you don't have to fast depending on you can still fast depending on the length of the trip. If you're pregnant, you don't have to, fast. If you're under the age of 13, if you're people below puberty, so little kids and stuff like that, they do not have to fast. They can if they want to, kind of to match their parents or cousins or whoever, their friends in the house, and they want to fast, is cool. But normally it's not pressed upon kids to fast before the ages of puberty, so about like 13, somewhere around there. I want to say that if a woman is on her period, that she doesn't have to fast. But I'll leave that up to some of the people in the comments, maybe to correct me on that if I'm wrong. But I think that might be one of the cases as well. What are we talking about? Elderly, so shout out to Miss Chatham. Hello. Elderly folks don't have to fast. But it's really, if you want to, you can. If it doesn't put you in a physical predicament and you hurt yourself or anything like that, then most people kind of fast, for the most part. But there are caveats to where you don't have to fast. So yeah, so shout out to the comments. Yeah, for women on their period don't have to fast. Some special things happen during Ramadan. For the first, it's 30 days. Oh, so rewind. So the thing about how long the fast is. So in total, the fast is 30 days, just 30 days from Ramadan 1 to Ramadan 30. During each day, the fast is from sunup to sundown. Now, that may seem like, oh, wow, how do I know that the sun is up? Oh, when do I know that the sun is go down? So luckily for Muslims, Muslims pray 5 times a day. Those 5 prayers, Fajr, Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha, and then Witr, the Witr on the end of there. But those 5 prayers, they occur at certain very specific points during the day, based on the position of the sun. So they can really calculate a specific time about when that happens. So actually what people do is they start their fast right before the first prayer. So right before Fajr. And around where I am, Fajr comes in at around like 4:30-ish, right? 4:20-ish. So what happens is people will genuinely kind of stop fasting right before that first prayer. So right before Fajr. So let's just call it 4:20. So say Fajr's at 4:20, people just stop fast. People start their fast at 4:20 a.m. You fast after Fajr, you fast through Zuhr, you fast through Asr, and then when you get to Maghrib, which is the 4th prayer of the day, right, which actually is the sunset prayer, right, and it comes around at a very exact time every day. It may change a little bit because, but it's basically around the same period of time every day. And here, around where I is, Maghrib comes in at 7:52 or something like that. And soon as that prayer comes in, you stop breaking, you break your fast, you start eating, right? And from Maghrib through Isha, all the way back around to Fajr, you can eat, you can do whatever you want. You can have sexual relations with your spouse, you can smoke, you can eat a whole turkey if you want to, you can eat a pile of pancakes, you can do whatever you want to do. What happens between these times though is between Fajr and Isha. The Isha is the evening prayer, and it comes in around like 9:30. If you're at a mosque, normally what people do after Isha, only for Ramadan, which is a very special time, they do something called Tarawih. Tarawih. Say it with me. Tarawih. Tarawih. Right. Tarawih. And Tarawih is the night prayers. They call it the night prayers. And it only happens during Ramadan. And they started that first day. Actually, to be very correct, Ramadan actually comes in the night. The night, right? The night. So if you started fasting, let's just say everybody agreed that this Ramadan started Tuesday, but your first day of fasting was Wednesday. Or people say Ramadan started on Monday, but your first day of fasting is actually Tuesday. It's because Ramadan comes in at night, right? So actually the first night of Ramadan, people start Tarawih. Even before they start fasting, they'll do Tarawih prayers. And then that next morning, right at Fajr is when they'll start their fast. and start fasting. So the Tarawih prayer is basically a separate set of prayers, and it's 10 prayers in total, 10 prayers that they do back to 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 back. And they do it every night, every 30 days during Ramadan. And basically what they're doing is they're reciting the entirety of the Quran, right? So the Quran is broken up into, I'm sorry. So for you guys that don't know, the Quran is broken up I think this is for Ramadan, for the Tarawih prayers. The Quran itself is a huge, big old book. I got an old one over there from like the 1700s or something like that. I got a real antique one from a friend. But the Quran is a really big book, real thick, big like this. Has like almost, I think like 1,000 pages in it. It's really big. What they do is the Quran is broken up into 30 parts. It's called Juz, J-U-Z. Not Jews, but shout out to my friends, my Jewish friends out there, doing what they do. But it's called Juz, J-U-Z, right? I think Juz means parts. And basically the Quran is broken up into 30 parts. And those 30 parts are for Ramadan. So when people do Tarawih, right, and they do those 10 prayers, what they'll do is they'll do a Juz, a part, a night for 30 days, right? So it's a part a night. So it's a very long prayer. It might last, depending on who the Imam is. The Imam is the guy who recites the Quran and leads the prayer. Depending on how fast he is, or she is, if there's a woman leading prayer, and there's women. Normally women don't lead prayer in the main mosque, but if there's a group of women who are actually praying, then you might have a woman imam to lead that prayer session. Depending on the speed of the imam, it could be 2 hours, or it could be like an hour and a half. So there's a whole set of prayers after Isha, after the night prayer, after you're done fasting, called night prayers, called Tarawih, which are basically people recite by the time you get to the end of the month, if you've done every Tarawih prayer, if you went every night, and you stayed for all 10 sets, 10 prayers, which we call 20 rakahs. So if you hear somebody saying, oh, they're doing 20 rakahs, that means they're doing all 10 prayers, because each prayer is made up of 2 rakahs. 2 rakahs, ladies and gentlemen. 2, say it with me, 2 rakahs. Rakahs. So some people might say they're doing 8 rakahs. They're just doing 8. Or some people say they might do 10. But, whatever you want to do, right? And you don't have to go to a mosque to do the Tarawih prayers. Normally people go out to the mosque. They go and then they do the Tarawih prayers in something called a Jamaat. A Jamaat is just a group of people. So it's like when you look into a mosque, you see a bunch of people praying. That's called a Jamaat. But you can do it at home. And from what I understand, you don't necessarily have to recite the Quran. You recite what you know of the Quran. So people who know the prayers, a certain list of prayers, they might know 10 or whatever. You just recite what you know, and then that's Tarawih, right? So is that it? Yeah, so I hope that cleared up some things for some people who didn't know about what Ramadan is. And the whole point, when you think about the whole point of what Ramadan is supposed to mean, it's for fasting for God, for the most part, right? For Muslims believe in God, and they believe that fasting is one of the pillars, one of the kind of the opportunities and responsibilities that God places upon people. And that they follow it, and that fasting is for God and God alone, right? That's one goal. It's multi-goal. It's not just one single thing. So that's one thing. You're fasting for God, and you're fasting for forgiveness. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about fasting during Ramadan. It forgives all your sins and gives you blessings and this, that, and the third. On another level, it's kind of it's a spiritual reset for you. So for Muslims who like go through the year like me, who are like, I'm not really gonna pray today, or people like, I'm not gonna do this today, I'm not gonna do that today, who kind of like are looking for a reset to get back into their religion in a very serious way. You'll see people do it, kind of use Ramadan, because Ramadan kind of really takes you out of society in a very interesting way and props you right down into the mosque or around a bunch of other Muslims and stuff like that. It just creates this air of just spirituality, and people embrace that, and they try and use that as a hard reset to get themselves back into or get closer to their religion if they kind of strayed away through the year. which I would raise my hand and personally say that I do from time to time. So I definitely embrace Ramadan very, very closely in that form, to kind of have a spiritual reset and just give my body a chance to, be fully close to the pleasures and all of the things that come along with being Muslim. Societally, culturally, it's a good chance to meet and mingle with a bunch of people from different cultures. At my mosque, there's a bunch of Africans from different places, and Bangladeshis and Pakistanians and stuff like that. So we get to hang and chill, and that's pretty cool. On another level, it's meant to, while there's an internal aspect, it's also meant to have this external aspect where you really take into consideration people who don't have, who don't have food, who don't have the opportunity to break their fast or even start their fast. When we break fast, it's called iftar. Iftar. Say it with me. Iftar. Like if tar was a car, it would be whatever. But it's called iftar when they break the fast. So at that moment, you really kind of hopefully are reflecting upon the people who don't have, and not just sit there and reflect on them, but actually get inspired to go do something for them and help them. Another thing that I personally do during Ramadan is I'll try and pick a religion outside of Islam. So this year I'm studying Judaism. I try and study a religion during Ramadan other than Islam. So you read the Quran. If you go to Tata, if one of the things that are that people kind of put upon you is to, like, you should read the Quran during Ramadan. You should read the Quran. You should read the Quran. But I mean, some people, they say you should just read a verse. If you can read a verse and really act upon that verse, then that's better than you just sitting back trying to read this whole big book in 30 days. And if you go on the Tadawi, you're listening to the Quran and you're hearing it, you're around it. So I don't really put too much pressure on myself to do that, especially if you've read the Quran before. So what I try and do is learn about other religions during Ramadan that I'm interested about, or that have like a close relationship to Islam or in conflict with Islam, and really try and get an understanding of why that conflict occurs. And Ramadan is a very good time to do it, simply because there's so much spirituality and stuff like in the air. And there's so much reason, because you're explaining to people why you're fasting and this, that, and the third. And you get to hear their responses, and they say, oh, that's interesting. You got to explain it out to them. So it's just a good, period of time to kind of have reciprocal communication with folks of other ilks and other religions. And what you start to see is that a lot of it it's a lot closer than we think, a lot more intertwined than we think. Religions feed off each other. They're inspired by others. Even in the conflicts you see, it's not necessarily conflict sometimes in terms of the religion, because sometimes you think, oh, this religion is so bad because they do this, but then you turn around and you read your Bible, or you read your Veda, or your whatever kind of spiritual books or manuals that you have, and you'll see there might be even some similarities. And if it's not the similarities, you could say, oh, but the religion doesn't teach that. But then we back to this conversation where we say, oh, well, it might be our societies that we live in, right? That actually create these things that get attributed to religion. So it makes you double think before you start to punish or judge or point fingers at the religion for the problems of society. That it might be society itself which is actually generating these problems, because you can see it in your own religion. So it's a very kind of wake up call kind of thing if you choose to use it as such, which is what I do. So I've been studying Judaism. It's a fabulous, insightful religion. It's very interesting. And to see the separation between Islam and Judaism, where they intersect and where they dissect, and just watching different little videos and essays on different rabbis from different points of view. So you got people from super nationalist, Zionist, very kind of points of view, and people that are very so close to Islam, it's almost like you think that they're faking the funk. You're like, bro, what you got up your sleeve? Because you being too nice to these Muslims. But I mean, all in all, it's all good. So that's Ramadan. Okay. Hope that cleared up some things. The major thing is people think, oh, you can't eat, you can't drink, you're going to die. And it's like, well, no, you're not going to die. But if you are in a position where you really might die, then you shouldn't fast. I mean, that's just what that is. But for the most part, people aren't going to starve to death within, 12, 15 hours, however long the actual fast is. So again, it starts before Fajr. There's 5 prayers: Fajr, Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. And then you throw Witr on the end of there. But people generally start fasting right before Fajr, which is at 4:20-ish a.m. Let's call it 4:30. So they'll stop fasting around that time. and then they'll start fasting around that time, and then they'll fast through the afternoon prayer, the midday prayer, which is Zura Asr, and then they'll break their fast right at sunset, right at 7:50 or 7:52 or 8:15 or whenever Maghrib, the sunset prayer, comes in, wherever you are in the world and wherever you live, and then you're good to just go nuts and go to the buffet from Maghrib all the way back till Fajr comes around, right? So you got the whole night to have dinner. So basically, Ramadan, you're basically skipping breakfast and skipping lunch. No, actually, you're having breakfast. You're having an early breakfast, skipping lunch, and then having dinner. Simple, right? For the Lord. Yeah? All right, cool. So, what else? What else are we going to talk about, Wasalu? Lupe, what are you going to talk about? Also want to use the time I got you to bring your attention to the world, man. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Whatever your political point of view is, social point of view, philosophical point of view. It's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, especially here in America, which, depending on which side of the fence you're on, is something that's magical, and for the other side is something that might be extremely terrible, extremely horrible. We got a bunch of crazy stuff happening in the political space. Our president is, I don't know, the world is, I don't know, around him. But I hope that you all out there are finding some type of balance or searching to achieve some type of personal balance in your lives in the midst of all of this chaos and social craziness and school shootings and all these terrible events that are happening around just in this country within the past few weeks. And I hope that in that, it's not driving you crazy. Don't let it drive you crazy, right? Let it reinforce some of your goals. If you have life goals to help folks or change things or speak truth to power or something like that, let that be an inspiration for you as opposed to something that tears you down or makes you desperate. You can't save everyone. You can't save everything. You can't correct everyone. You can't correct everything. But you do your part. And as long as you're doing your part, don't beat yourself up too much about the things that happen, but definitely take this time that we're living in right now very seriously, because it will affect the future, right? And the real fight is for the future. The purpose in your life, the purpose in my life, isn't necessarily trying to fix now, simply because it's so dynamic and so written and so kind of processed. In a process to be what it is and maintain and stay that way, I always try and keep at least one of my eyes on the future, and what I can do about the future, because the future is unwritten. And there's no guarantee of what actually controls or determines the future. It's just theories about what people say control the future. Is it money? Is it power? Is it violence? Is it religion? Is it this? Is it that? We don't know what it's going to be. Most people say it's technology, but who knows? At the end of the day, people still have to use that technology. I say that to say that whatever you're doing, you may think that it's not able to be of a level to affect future trends or change the future, but you don't know that. So embrace that unknown, right? And still just carry on with what you do, right? At the highest potential and the highest level that you can do, with a whole sense of urgency as you look out and you look at the world and see what's happening out around us. And whatever field that is, if it's medicine, if it's education, if it's charity work, if it's whatever it is for you that you do personally to try and help and affect change in the world, a positive change, right? Not selfishness or to increase your own net worth at the expense of somebody else, or to exploit somebody else's values, or to take over somebody else's life for the sake of belittling them or something like that. Whatever it is that you do, no matter how small or how large it is, use these opportunities that we live in today to really motivate yourself to push through some of those limitations, some of those barriers, to accomplish those goals that you have personally. And don't ever let the size of your followers or even whether it be big or small, kind of confuse you into thinking otherwise, right? So always be humble and always, stick to your guns. Speak truth to power, yeah? Cool. So that was another thing I want to do. I want to kind of talk about purpose. And for me, and we're going to segue into Pusha T in the 6. smoke. What I want to talk about is purpose. I want to shout out to Ebony Magazine. You know, it might have been a little bit satirical, but maybe not. Shout out to Ebony Magazine for calling me the professor. They say Professor Lupe Fiasco. It's like, I'm a professor, like Professor Xavier, right? Bringing context to Drake's blackface photo. What's the title of the article? So, yeah, I'll take Professor. You know what I'm saying? Professor Wasaloo, Professor Jacob, whatever. But I'm not a professor. But I do want to talk about purpose and to reset. And what is purpose? What is your purpose? What is your purpose as an artist? What is your purpose as a human being, as a person living in society, a person having a platform and a stage? What is your purpose? What is Wasaloo's purpose? What? Lupe Fiasco's purpose. Lupe Fiasco's purpose has always been, well, up to a certain point. I'll say up to a certain point, because Lupe Fiasco's been around for a long time. And some of that time, you didn't know who I was. So from the time that you knew who I was, 10, 15 years ago, whenever the clock starts for you, mine has always been about improving the conditions in which we live. Whether that is the physical conditions, or the mental conditions, or the spiritual conditions. And when I say we, I mean black people first, right? And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, racist, or oh, forget all the other folks. And it's not like the distance between first and second is like this big. Like, no, it's like that much. It's probably on the same finger. So it's like this half of the finger is first, that half of the finger is second, everybody else. And I say it for black people first because that's where I come from. I'm a black person. That's what I see. When I grew up, that was the neighborhoods that I lived in. But I've lived in a few different neighborhoods coming up. But I've lived in the ghettos of the west side of Chicago, and came up in circumstances and conditions where you got to see firsthand the effects of all of the from the first slave ship all the way to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., rest in peace, all the way up to people getting shot for Michael Jordans because the color was red and black and they were walking through a GD neighborhood, and to the projects getting torn down, to, you know, O.J. Simpson, to just all of the ranges of black experience in America. You see it like hit concentrated in some of the neighborhoods that I grew up in. So my goal, my purpose was to improve the conditions of black people as much as I could exponentially, right? And it still is that. And what I can't do physically in terms of having capital to build a school or refurbish a neighborhood or redevelop Inglewood or redevelop Garfield Park or Compton or whatever, what I can't do in that capacity, I try and do on my artistic capacity and make sure that my art that I create points towards that, as opposed to pointing towards things that don't take us to that level, right? That take us to places that are defeatist, that take us to places that actually reinforce some of the issues that we have, that keep us in a certain cycle, but all within a certain context, right? All within the context of improvement of the black mental scape, the black heart scape, right? The black spiritual scape, whatever that is for you, whether it be, you know, if it's Christianity, it's Christianity. That improves you and helps you become a better person because that's your context. Then so be it. If it's Judaism, so be it. If it's Buddhism, so be it. If it's atheism that keeps you from being a drug dealer and a rapist, and that provides you a certain moral compass to improve your conditions and the conditions of people around you, then, you know, so be it in terms of your impact in society and how it affects me and my family and the people that are around us. Different strokes for different folks, basically. So that's my purpose, is to inject everything that I do with that purpose of accomplishing the goal of improving the conditions of black folks in America. Using the evidence of, you know, Roseanne as of yesterday or what have you. So whenever I get an opportunity or whenever something comes to the surface that hints at the conditions of black folks, I always try and at least present the full picture, pun intended, the full picture, the full totality of what's actually happening. And it's a learning moment. It's a teachable moment. Trying to pull away from the actual what's happening. So I'm not really interested in Pusha T dissing Drake or Drake dissing Pusha T. And who's winning, who's gonna be the better rap, who can talk about, who can bring each other down the best. I mean, I know it's a part of hip hop and that's cool, but it's also a whole other side of hip hop that has nothing to do with that. That doesn't champion that. That doesn't thrive off that. That doesn't need that to build. And there is a part of hip hop that actually does build off that. I mean, battle rap is especially the URL space. Shout out to the URL and all those dudes. I mean, they are at each other's throats and it gets personal and it goes crazy and it does that. And does it build on the art form? Like, yeah, it does. I mean, it introduces MCs to new themes and tactics. Maybe it gives them new motivations to expand the skill set or the skill level of the form, if not overall, at least in that pocket when it comes to lyricism. But again, you don't need that to become a great lyricist. You don't need to have become a battle rapper to become a great lyricist. So that correlation doesn't necessarily prove out across all scenarios. But it is a teachable moment within this, simply because of the race aspect that was brought up, and how it was presented and how it became immediately focused upon one thing. When you remove the context of what actually could potentially be happening. Now, I'm not saying that's what the homie Six was his intentions were. I'm almost sure that they were, but because it's Ramadan and I don't want to break my fast by maybe lying or assuming something, I'm just reading it as just as a spectator, just like you are. So when I seen the Drake Duppy freestyle came out, I really did. I really try not to listen to it until after after time to break fast, because I didn't want to catch a stray MF or something like that, and it really just shocked me or whatever. Really religiously sensitive during Ramadan, so I try not to listen to it. And the same thing with Pusha's thing. Didn't want to listen to it after. So when the Duppy freestyle came out, if you don't know, I'm a big fan of Drake. I think that he's in his capacity as an MC, when he actually puts in that effort to actually perform as an MC. I mean, like it's something to see. It's very dope as a MC myself, to see MC just go off. And there's been moments where I've seen Drake go off, and I was just like, oh wow. Especially his earlier albums when he was really just like about the bars. It was kind of like, wow, this dude can really rap. No matter what you feel about him or think about him or think about his music, when it comes down to his raps, I mean, they're really good. Whether they're ghostwritten or not, I mean, we don't know what all is ghostwritten or what isn't ghostwritten or what's not, or who does this or who does that. But I mean, I'm not even going to have that conversation with you. I actually wrote a whole essay about ghostwriting when the Meek Mill and Drake, the first beef with Meek Mill and Drake came out, and I would cordially invite you to go find that. It was all about ghostwriting and its place in and around hip hop and what it means. But for me, I'm not even thinking about that, right? Because we're not talking about who's the best rapper. That isn't what this is about, right? Because I'm assuming that everybody who's watching this isn't judging either Pusha T or Drake to be the best rapper. I don't think that they're saying this is a competition for the GOAT of who's the best lyricist rapper. We're not talking about that. We're talking about within this beef in and of itself, who had the best verse, and et cetera, et cetera. This isn't something about this is the end all be all tournament of who's the best rapper ever in the world. We have a long time before we even if we even are able to have that conversation. And I'm definitely not going to have a conversation with y'all because some of y'all don't rap. But anyway, so I heard Drake's piece. I thought it was again dope because I like Drake when he gets in his little bag. and it's cool. And I was like, oh man, let's see if Pusha, and y'all see me on Twitter. I was like, man, let's see what Pusha gonna do. Pusha gotta respond, Pusha gotta kill him. And I keep a jovial, almost sarcastic attitude about it. I hope it's something within that beef that doesn't spill into the streets or go anything like that. And you kind of know that you hope that that's not going to happen. So I always kind of go with the best. I don't think it's going to be that. I see it more, hopefully them coming to terms with it after all this is over. Maybe, I don't know if that's the case now, but, reconciling that and moving on. I think it's something that, they have more power together than they do apart. And I'm not just saying that to cop out or nothing like that. Maybe sometime me on Twitter, it might get lost in translation. You might not hear my tone. But sometimes I'm joking. I try and throw a LOL emoji or some funny picture to let you know I'm not really taking this seriously. And I'm come from a battle space, and I understand that. So I have this side of me that's very like chill and, professor-y. Shout to Ebony Magazine about the professor. But there's another side to me that's very like funny and, but also very, when it comes to battling, I'm going to call it how I call it, and I'll battle you and do diss records and all that stuff. So not elite or above anyone. So I'm not really taking the whole thing serious in terms of it being a life or death situation between these two brothers who I know. And are actually super cool. Pusha T is super cool. Drake is always super cool. Been on the road, actually, I think with both of them. I think Pusha was on the Glow in the Dark tour. Been on the records with Pusha. So have no ill will to either one of them. And so when the Pusha verse came around, us to Pusha verse, I'm like, oh, he went off. He really dug and got mean. More for the bars. I don't really get into the personals thing. I mean, it's there, but it's like I'm as a man, that's none of my business. So I'm not really just gonna chat it up or barbershop chat about somebody else's personals, things like that. But when it comes to rapping and things of that, I mean, I will comment on the quality and the levels of the raps, and they both went off. Drake went off, Pusha went off. I had a couple theories about how Pusha should strategize and maybe like respond and maybe don't do this. And, I personally think that Drake, you can't beat Drake in a battle. I think he's kind of positioned himself in society and in the game in a certain way that unless you really, your paperwork has to be extremely clean and neat, and your ability to bar him to death has to be just top notch. And that's not like, I hate Drake, I'm against Drake, or this is how you beat Drake. I mean, it's just, as a rapper, it's one of those things where you sit back and you think like, how could you, if I had to battle this dude, what would I do to do that? And it was like, well, I can't battle him, because as soon as he says something about Obama, about me, I'm done to the whole world. My turn is over. But there is there's something fun and interesting about thinking about if you had to battle Drake, how would you do it? What would the processes be like? What would the bars be? What would you talk about? And not in a way to bring him down or hurt him personally or something like that, but just more just from a rapper's kind of that competitive point of view, which is what you guys were interested in. Like, what do you think is competition is this? So it's like, all right, competition, is it supposed to be fun? Is it supposed to be to the death? Like, what are we talking about? So just to lay it out first for that battle space, like, I like Drake, like Pusha T. Always liked them, like their music. I don't agree with 100% of everything, simply because I don't go to the club. So the club, I'm rocking the car to Galchester, but other than that, and the same thing with Pusha. I mean, there's only so much, I'm not even gonna speak on that, but there's only so much of that stuff that I can take. Especially in light of when your purpose is to whatever my past is, whatever your past is, what are we doing to reset the narrative for the future generations, to show them that there's a wider space, and there's much more to being a black man than being coming from the streets. And the kids who don't come from the streets, you don't need to go to the streets to get a certain level of validation, or certain life proof, or a certain level of manhood. You don't necessarily need that. And I'm not saying that Pusha is guilty of that, because I don't think that he is in totality, but I think everybody plays a role and needs to be very deliberate about what their role is when you think about the purpose of black folk. And there's some folk who don't care about that. They don't care about it's them and what they do. And I'm sure that Pusha is a very open-minded, very thoughtful person behind what he does, and there is some reasoning. And he's totally about some of the same processes and projects of increasing and improving the conditions of black folk overall. Now let's get to the business of the cover art. Now, the cover art that Pusha T put out for his freestyle, when I first seen it, I was like, oh, yo, what is this? What is this? I didn't think it was Photoshop, but I was like, what is this from? And of course, that's a question everybody asks. It's like, yo, what is this from? Where did he get this picture from? And I immediately think, because I'm a thinker and I think very crazily, I'm like, man, there has to be a reason behind this, right? This isn't just something that, just comes out of nowhere, right? Or like, so that's why people think like, is this Photoshop? Because why would this exist? So when you start to do the research, you're like, where does this come from? Or you start to ask mentally, just yourself, where does this come from? You come up with all these theories and hypotheses. And one of the hypotheses I came up with was like, it has to be for something, it has to be for some type of maybe promotion for something, maybe a video that we don't know about, maybe something old, because it's definitely young Drake. It's definitely not swole, bearded Drake. It's like, where did this come from? And then I'm thinking like, man, Drake used to be an actor. So, he came from Degrassi, so it might be something that's a part of his acting thing or, whatever. Acting is a very, it goes all over, you don't know, stuff will come up. You're dressed like a ninja or you're dressed like this from some old acting stuff. So who knows? So you think like, where did this come from? Where did this come from? And I kind of left it at that because it was kind of undescribed and it was kind of like, let's see, because no one knew. And then go on my Twitter to kind of talk about it, and somebody sends a photo of the whole thing, and you start to see like, oh wow, this was from this dude's website. It was a photographer. He took the photo. Here's the link, and somebody sent not the link, but they sent the actual full, I guess, photo shoot of what it was, and it was the blackface picture of Drake like this, and then it was a picture of him saying like this in blackface, but one was a color picture, one was a black and white picture. And for me, instantly as an artist and a person who loves art and painting and photography and does all that stuff, I immediately seen it was like, oh wow. And then you look at in the corner of the title and it says Drake, us, them, or us and them, or us versus them, or something like that. And I immediately seen it as being like, oh, this is something. I didn't even see the Jim Crow shirt, which is another story, which I'll get into. But I didn't even see the Jim Crow shirt. I just saw the two photos, and I immediately knew what the potential intentions of that photo shoot were. And I knew it wasn't, Drake is black. Like, why would he just willy-nilly throw on blackface to make fun of black folk? He's black. When he takes the paint off, he's still black. He's still in blackface. Like it didn't so that kind of piece didn't make sense to me, and it still doesn't make sense to me. And it's actually, I don't believe it. I think what it was, and even the photographer even hinted at towards what the point was. He's making a statement about black culture, the perspective of what black folks are supposed to be. Are we just supposed to be entertainers and shucking and jiving? And then what is the pain behind that shuckery and that jivery? Like, what does that do to us? How do people perceive us? What is the perception of us? And some people may not like that he used blackface to do that, but this isn't the first time that people that we know, famous people who we idolize in the black community, have used blackface specifically to prove a point. There's a movie called Bamboozled, which came out, I think, in the 90s. I think it's a Spike Lee film. And it has Savion Glover, who's one of the most amazing tap dancers in the world. It has Damon Wayans. It has Jada Pinkett. Mos Def is in it. Charlie Baltimore is in it. There's a suite of rappers that are in it. And the whole movie is about a show where, I think it's either Keenan Ivory Wayans or Damon Wayans. He works at like some television company, and they want him to do a show, but they want it to be edgy. And so he's like, he wants to get fired. So he thinks that I think that's the plot. If he he presents to them this show that's going to get him fired, if I'm just put on the wildest show ever and nobody's going to really accept it, it's going to get him fired out of his contract. And it was a show about blackface. And he's brought back blackface, but he brought back blackface with black people in blackface, to prove like this point. And the movie is wild. if you've never seen it, it's wild. It's shot in a very weird way. It's almost like it's a weird back TV show kind of thing. The acting is somewhat good. I mean, somewhat superb, but we're not going to get into that because we know about Black Panther. I'll talk about actors. But for the statement that the film makes, it's amazing. But it presents to you a situation as a black person, and if you're a black artist and a black entertainer, it really brings home the point of like, what is your purpose, right? What is the reason that you do what you do? And there's some folks who just do it strictly for their entertainment purposes. There's some folks who do things that we look at as like, wow, why is this dude shucking and jiving? You know, why is this dude tap dancing for these white folks? Why is this dude doing this? Why is this doing that? And other capacities we'll look at as like, this dude is standing up for this or this dude is standing up for that. It's funny that we as kind of these revolutionary, politically charged artists, we go and do a show, and you look out in the show, and it's like the whole first 15 rows is white folks. You know, and it's just kind of like, say the N-word that I put in this song, or this, that, and the third, which you just saw with Kendrick. On the flip side, you see somebody like Kanye, who I've been on tour with, who, you know, will be in a stadium full of people and tell white folks when the N-word comes around in one of his songs, you know, tells white people it's okay. This is your only time when you can actually say nigga when it's in my song or something like that. And it was kind of like, wow, right? And you got a stadium full of white people saying nigga. But it's cool because, you know, Kanye kind of gave them the permission that night. But it was more than one tour that he did that on. And it always was a little funky to me. And that's why I did my song, not Lamborghini Angels, but Audubon Ballroom, saying black white people can't say the word nigga. And it was really somewhat of a response to, you know, what I seen Kanye do on tour. It's like, bro, that's not, you got to be careful with that. So, I mean, all in all, it's, you know, how much of artistic expression do you allow artistic expression to exist and create conversation and instigate circumstances? And is that issue settled? Is the issue of blackface and black folk exploiting themselves, exploiting the worst of themselves, exploiting the showing off the most banal, the most base of themselves for entertainment and for capital gain? Is that something that is settled? And that's why we don't need blackface anymore? Somebody positioning themselves or presenting blackface as a conversation starter? Does it not exist in real life? Right? So Drake's thing was definitely not real life. It was a photograph. But does blackface actually exist? Right? In black folk, in the artistic space right now. That's not in blackface. I mean, they're just using their regular face. There isn't a caricature. I mean, it presents those positions and it presents those questions. A learned, thoughtful person, I think, would actually want to look at that as a little bit deeper before like becoming emotionally invested into it, and maybe be a little bit more intellectually invested before you allow it to, you know, seep into your emotions and it becomes part of your behavior and you start to make emotional mistakes. Best make those intellectual mistakes because they can become corrected. When it becomes an emotional part of you, it becomes a little bit harder to shake that. And it hurts when you get corrected. It's not to defend or to deflect, which was my first statement. It's to provide the context. And the context from a critical thinker like myself with purpose is to how can I take this, from my point of view, take this conversation and then push it somewhere else where we really can get at the heart of what's being presented and not get caught up just in the trend of, you know, Pusha T called a body, or yo, did you see that was dope, but you missed kind of the whole point, or you don't realize how easily you can be influenced to just look at one thing taking it out of its context, and then it creates this whole wave of ignorance and misguidedness, right? So that's basically it. I don't really pick the sides. I think Drake is a little bit ahead in terms of the battles. Maybe there'll be more rebuttals. I don't know, because I'm not listening even to after Ramadan. I'm kind of done with this. But I do, you know, as you know, Lupe Fiasco fans or critics, I do think that it's important to, obviously it shows, it hits some type of nerve that people still feel a certain way about that representation and what that representation means and what it stands for. So what I would say to you is take that same momentum that you have, that emotional reaction to seeing that one picture of Drake, and then do a full kind of deep dive into the history of blackface, what it was meant for, why was it so prevalent in America for a very long time. I mean, blackface was a part of actual American culture for a long time, and kind of publicly and widely accepted as black folks, white folks representing black folks. But the reasonings are very weird and interesting, because they didn't want black folks, maybe a theater where black folks couldn't perform. Right, so it's like, we need to do this play, and so we need to have a black character. So you gonna be the black guy, and it's just a bunch of white people. So I mean, whatever the reasonings are, not to apologize for or to bring unnecessary levels of relevance to it. I will just say, back to the original point, that if you let this be motivation for you to really study what blackface is, how it's been used, how black folks have taken over blackface, subverted it, and then pushed it back into the face of culture and white entertainment complex, to create a statement. So look at movies like Bamboozled. Even look at Little Brother. They had an album called The Minstrel Show, where they were kind of mockingly being making kind of the Sambo faces and then the big smiles and stuff like that. Even look at Jay-Z's 444 album and the story of OJ, where he had kind of a Sambo, kind of a black-faced kind of character, so to speak. Not necessarily blackface, but those features of blackface, which they exemplify, such as the big lips and the whole thing. And just really look at how that has progressed through society and what it means. And if it hurts you, why does it hurt you? Because it's not cool to just sit there and be hurt and be offended, because blackface necessarily, if that's a weapon that they can use against you and you haven't found a way to kind of eliminate that or neutralize it, then it'll always be able to be used as a weapon against you. And the point is not to just become comfortable with the weapon, or is to overcome the weapon, right? Overcome the damage that it does to you. Not necessarily make yourself immune to it, but at least build up a stronger defense, because you have a deeper understanding. And most of the times there's two sides to the story, and when you get both sides of the story, it kind of neutralizes that. So I just say that, take that into consideration if you're feeling of certain ways about it. It's not to defend Drake. If you hate Drake, I mean, you hate him. It is what it is. I'm not trying to correct you from that. What I am trying to say is take this opportunity to really study deeply the history of blackface, some of its political implications from when it first started, which was actually like in the 1400s, I think, was the first kind of case of it, right? I mean, don't judge me on that, but I mean, it's something that's been around for a while. It's not something that's new. And then its heyday through the 1800s and in America and different places around the world, and then all the way up to today, and then how it affects you, how you deal with it. So that's really just that on that. Okay. Cool. Everybody cool with that? Did I make my point? Did I leave something out? Do you agree? If you don't agree, I mean, it's fine. It doesn't really matter. And it doesn't really undo what has happened. So for my thoughtful fans out there, maybe take a deeper look into blackface if you're interested. If not, so be it. What I do want to do is talk about something very specific, and it's weird. It's separate from all of this Drake stuff. That stuff is over. So if you want to leave, you can leave. There's no more talk about diss records and battles and blah blah blah. Shout out to Pusha and Drake. Hope you brothers can find some reconciliation, even at the height of your conflict, because that's what we need, is actually unification, not separation. But I do want to talk about something that's inspired by this, which is something that I found out maybe a couple years ago. I was doing some research and I found this, and it blew my mind, because I was like, wow, this is super racist, but it's double racist. It's like interesting racist, and it's interesting because it brings up Drake as the impetus of this, because Drake is black and he's Jewish. And I made a comment where I said Drake is a mix of kind of the two most hated races on earth, blacks and Jews, who just have documented history of just being like beat up, for a long time, and history of great achievements and beautiful collaborations. One of the most beautiful collaborations, other than Drake being black and Jewish and creating Galchester for me, which is a great, shout to blacks and Jews coming together and creating Galchester. No, but one of my favorite songs of all time, which is Strange Fruit. Strange Fruit, which is a song about lynching, which was written actually by a Jewish writer and was sung by Billie Holiday. One of the most famous and prestigious black singers of all time, who actually was a heroin addict, to bring in Pusha T back into this situation, and him using Whitney Houston's album cover picture of her, her bathroom and the drugs and stuff like that, to really bring some interesting historical context and really take this in another direction. You have a song like Strange Fruition, which is about to bring light and awareness to the issue of blacks being lynched. Sung by a black woman, written by a Jewish man. You fast forward now, you have Drake, who's a black person, also Jewish, mixed, who is being kind of like put out into the world as having blackface, doing a photo shoot where he used blackface with a Jim Crow t-shirt, which is actually a company called Two Black Guys in Canada, which actually makes some dope clothes, who actually are like really super radical and inspired by Malcolm X. So before you go too crazy about that Jim Crow t-shirt, please understand that brand has actually did major work to bring, some awareness through clothing, with some of their things. I had a dope jacket from them that was about picking cotton, which was just like insane to even just be able to wear. It was so nuts. So don't write that off. Don't drink that Kool-Aid too deeply. Because there's a story behind that shirt, which I think actually you pro-black and black woke folks will actually really kind of be inspired by, from a business and from a cultural fashion standpoint. The flip flop, bringing that back to say that, Billie Holiday was a drug addict, Whitney Houston was addicted to drugs for a time, and to just kind of see these two weird things come back together and coalesce is very interesting to me. So the reason I bring this up is because of this picture right here. Right? Can y'all see that? That picture right there. Let you absorb it, soak it in. So what we got right here, we got a black person playing the saxophone, probably some jazz, dressed up in the jazziness of the time. He's got that earring, right? It was actually pretty swaggy. He got the big old Sambo lips, somewhat of a blackface caricature, but he has a Jewish star, the Star of David, right here, right? And it says in Tarte music and some German. So this was German. This was actually something that was produced by the Nazi Party, and it was for an exhibition that they did. I don't know if the music exhibition was part of this, but they did an art exhibition about degenerative music, and they looked at it as music that was done by Jews and blacks and homosexuals and all the other peoples in person who weren't just pure Jewish, pure Nazi Aryan blood. Everything that they did was considered to be degenerate and to be rejected from society. And this was a real thing. This really happened. And what they did, they went and they got all of this kind of art and music and things and stuff that was done by those races of folks, of Jews and blacks and different folks. And they did this big exhibit to like kind of mockingly show it, and they paid people to be in the exhibit to like make fun of stuff and create kind of like tension. They really kind of defaced the artwork with like handwritten things. They tried to really expose that it was primitive and not on the level of kind of like the classic white folk German kind of aesthetic. And then the exhibit actually turned out to be one of the most visited exhibits in modern history in terms of modern art. Because they really focused on kind of like modern art, saying it was degenerate expressionism, stuff like that. And then they took a lot of the work and they burned it. So after they put on this show for the German public to kind of parade and expose blacks and Jews and people that they didn't like as kind of making degenerative primitive art, they took everything and they burned it. Some of it they burned. Some of the stuff they sold off actually to American folks and did auctions and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring this up just to show you, the power of art. Right? Because we remember all of those artists and all the things that they did.